So recently I made a video criticizing Apex Legends, and in that video I did acknowledge certain aspects of the game that people find enjoyable, like, the movement, getting kills, finding good loot, becoming the champion squad, things like that. I get, those things are satisfying, sure. But there is so much of this game that is absolutely fucking terrible. Like, this game is complete cheeks. And if you enjoy it, great, good for you. You can enjoy whatever you want to enjoy. I'm not here to tell you you're not allowed to enjoy it. Some people say, "Oh, just let people enjoy what they enjoy." Like, you can, right? I'm not arguing against that. But this game is dog shit for a lot of reasons. Listen, if you play Apex and you're happy with simply just, running around for a little while, shooting your gun, getting a couple kills, using your abilities, and occasionally you win a game here or there, fine. If that's all it takes for you to enjoy this game, good for you. There's nothing wrong with that, and I mean that. But when I say this game is absolutely terrible, just know this is coming from the perspective of somebody who plays ranked, and only plays ranked, and is trying to rank up. I enjoy gaining RP and moving my way up through the ranks. If this game did not have a ranking system, I probably wouldn't be putting any time into this game at all. Like, I've been playing it a good amount recently, and that is pretty much just because of the ranking system. That's the case with a lot of games. And I mentioned this in past videos about how ranking systems or progression systems have a big influence on how much I do or do not play a game. But listen, although I say I enjoy playing ranked and winning, that doesn't mean I'm someone who absolutely has to win or else I'm not having fun. Or I'm just obsessed with being the highest rank or something like that. No, it's not that. I just get enjoyment out of games from trying to win and grinding for a rank. That's how I enjoy a lot of games, and I don't think there's anything wrong with that. So yeah, keep that in mind. When I play Apex, I'm playing to rank up. I want to gain RP. That's why I'm here. I am not someone who hops on Apex just to play casual and doesn't care if I win or lose. Nothing wrong with that. If that's you, cool. If you enjoy the game that way, that's fair. For me, I like progressing through the ranks. So one of the main things that drives me absolutely insane with Apex Legends is how much RNG is in this game. And this is something I talked about in my recent video criticizing Apex Legends, and I did receive some comments, and we're gonna read through them in this video. So the first comment I'm gonna read here is from Cerulean, and I don't know if I'm gonna read the whole comment, maybe I will. But the first thing you say, Cerulean, is, "I understand where you're coming from, but Apex has probably the least amount of RNG in a BR game." Yeah, that sentence alone absolutely blew my mind. If anything, it's literally the complete opposite. If anything, Apex Legends has the most RNG. It really is one of the most RNG-based shooters I can think of. When I think of a BR game that didn't involve a lot of RNG, I think of Warzone Season 1. Season 1, because that's when I played Warzone. So whenever I'm talking about Warzone, I'm talking about Season 1 Warzone. I don't know how it is now. But in Season 1 Warzone, first off, everybody dropped in with a weapon, so you didn't have the problem where you couldn't find a weapon in your house, but the other player in their house, they did get a weapon. So you're looking for a weapon, and they're chasing you, shooting you down. So you didn't have that problem because you dropped in with a pistol. You also didn't have tiered loot in Warzone, so you didn't have the problem where a player runs into a room and gets level 3 armor, and you're stuck with level 1 armor because the RNG ground loot just wasn't in your favor. So you didn't have that problem in Warzone. And also in Warzone, all you really had to do was get a couple bucks, find some cash, which was very easy to do, and then just buy your loadout. And then you were pretty much good at that point. All you had to do after that was focus on, getting zone and buying kill streaks, and that was it. So you didn't really even have to worry about looting after you bought your loadout. Also in Warzone, there were, I believe it was certain contracts you could do that would tell you the next zone location, and you could actually just do multiple of them back to back to back, so you could pretty much figure out where the end circle was going to be, like right off the rip. Yes, I know the zone is predictable in Apex Legends, but you don't always know exactly where it's going to be, right? Like, it is predictable, but you don't always know exactly where it's going to be. But in Warzone, you could do those contracts and you could see, you know, several zones ahead. It's also worth mentioning in Warzone, there were no knockdown shields like there are in Apex. So in Apex, somebody could find a level 3 knockdown shield, and when you knock that player, you might not be able to finish them because it takes a while to break that knockdown shield, and you're not in a position where you can, you know, get behind them and shoot them in the back, or you don't have any nades or whatever. In Warzone, they go down and they don't have any protection, so it's easy to finish the kill. And yeah, I understand people thirsted in Warzone and just, you know, finished you as soon as you went down, but there were many ways to come back in Warzone. You could just win your gulag fight like after you die and you're right back in. And even if you don't get in, even if you lose that, your teammates can buy you back in. So there were multiple ways to come back. Also with Warzone, there weren't any backpacks, so everybody had the same inventory size, right? It wasn't like some people found a level 3 backpack and were allowed to carry more items. No, there was none of that in Warzone. Everybody had the same inventory size. And another thing that was just nice about that was that you didn't have to loot for a backpack so that you could continue looting. Because I hate that in BR games where I have to run over a bunch of items to find a better backpack and then go back and pick up those fucking items. I hate that. And another thing about Warzone, which this has nothing to do with RNG, was ammo. You would automatically pick up ammo by walking over it, and it wouldn't take up any of your inventory space. And I mean, that isn't an RNG thing, but that was just really nice. And another thing about Warzone is it's even starts. You don't have different characters with different abilities and shit. No, everybody starts out exactly the same in Warzone. In Apex, you have multiple different characters with multiple different abilities. So sometimes you're getting hit with these abilities, that catch you by surprise. Sometimes you're fighting a team and you haven't, identified every character on the team, and you don't know exactly what they have, what abilities they can use on you. So yeah, that's another thing about, that I liked about Warzone. That's another way they've mitigated the RNG. It was even starts. So no, Apex Legends does not have the least amount of RNG in a BR game. Not even close. Not even close. There are a lot of RNG aspects of Apex. First off, the ground loot is RNG. Yes, I know the ground loot is RNG in pretty much every battle royale, but in Apex, you do have tiered armor, tiered backpacks, tiered knockdown shields. So some people are just finding better items based off of RNG. In Apex, you also don't fly in with a weapon, so there were multiple times where I would land and a team would land with us, and I open 2 crates, I run in a room, can't find a fucking weapon, but there's somebody chasing me down because there was a weapon in the first bin that they opened. So they got a weapon and I didn't, based off of RNG. It's random. Yes, I understand there is better loot in certain areas, like in the POIs, but still, it's randomized. Like there's situations where your room didn't have a gun or your supply bin didn't have a gun and theirs did. They got the gun before you based off of RNG. And Cerulean, you did say the weapons are all good. I don't think there's a weapon that is unusable or even bad. Maybe the P2020 without hammer points late game, but there's too much movement tech not to be able to take disadvantaged fights and still come out on top. First off, some weapons are better than others in certain situations, okay? Like that's just a fact. And like I just mentioned, sometimes enemy players just find the gun before you do. It's not that you can't get a gun, it's just that they got one first because the room that they checked or the crate that they opened had a gun and yours did not. And you mentioned how you can take disadvantaged fights. And I agree. Sometimes you can. And sometimes you win. But I'm just pointing out how there are many instances where players are put at a disadvantage based off of RNG. Now, I'm not saying that means you're gonna lose the fight or you're not gonna win the game. You can work around the RNG to a degree, but sometimes you can't. So sometimes you will lose a fight because RNG was in another team's favor. The zone was in their favor. The loot was in their favor, and they had better items than you. Not saying it's impossible to win with worse gear, but you're put in an unfavorable position based off of RNG. And sometimes you will lose that fight. And sometimes you lose these fights where if everything was even, everybody had the same weapons, the same armor, and all that, you would have won. But because RNG was in their favor and they had the better shit, you lost. And that's just fucking infuriating. And another aspect of this game that I think could be looked at as RNG is shield swapping. I think shield swapping is, incredibly dumb. People act like it's some big brain play, but it's fucking easy to do. It's very simple to do, especially if you don't have to go into a death box to do it and it's just sitting on the fucking ground. And I don't like things that grant huge advantages that don't take a lot of skill. Like shield swapping in Apex Legends, that can kind of be like a Uno reverse card. Like somebody can have you dead to fucking rights because they hit all their shots. They outgunned you. They're making the better plays. And there's a shield sitting on the ground right there, and you pick it up. You press a button. You're full shields again. Yeah, so much skill. Now, some people do strategically set themselves up so that they will be in a position where they can shield swap. And I'll talk about that in a second, but other times people just, shield swap with armor that's on the ground, the randomized ground loot. Like, I've seen situations where two players get in a fight and one player cracks the other shields, so that player runs away, runs into a room, and there just so happens to be a shield sitting right there on the ground for them. Sometimes it's a level 3, and they just shield swap. So now they're back to full shields just because, just at the press of a button. And like, this wasn't a shield swap that they planned to do ahead of time. No, like this room was unlooted. They just ran in it. They were running away from the fight because they were getting outgunned. And because of the randomized ground loot, there just so happened to be a shield on the ground, and that was an easy shield swap for them. So that's RNG, and that's also just easy. You press a single button to shield swap. Like, maybe if shield swapping was more skillful or something, you had to hit like some button combo to do it, I don't know, then maybe that would be cool, but it's just pressing a button. You get this huge advantage, this Uno reverse card, just for pressing a button. Like, that's not skillful, that's not impressive. Now, like I mentioned before, sometimes people will strategically set themselves up so they're in a position where they can shield swap if somebody cracks their shields, right? So you might have a team and they're holding a house, and if there's death boxes nearby or just, armor on the ground as ground loot, they might take that armor and bring it into the house and set multiple armors on the ground in a corner somewhere, right? Where they can easily access them if they need to shield swap. And like I mentioned, armor swapping is very easy to do. It's the click of a button. You click a button and you're back to full shields. While another player that doesn't have an armor swap available, they have to, pop shield cells or shield battery or whatever heals they have. And that obviously takes more time. Now, you might think it's smart that team was setting themselves up to have those armor swaps available when they need them. And sure, it is smart, but not every team has the luxury of doing that. Other teams might just not have any death boxes or armor on the ground nearby, and they just don't have the armor available to set themselves up for armor swapping. Other times, the zone isn't in their favor, so they have to move, and they can't, carry multiple armor with them. So when a team rolls up on that other team sitting in the house with all their armor swaps available, that team that doesn't have the armor swaps, they might end up losing that fight, not because they were missing their shots or didn't have good movement and weren't making the right plays. No, just because the other team had multiple armor swaps available in their building. The team that rolled up on them, they didn't know if there were armor swaps in there, right? They didn't know that. and they didn't have the luxury of having armor swaps of their own. And you're not always in a position where you can have a bunch of armor available to swap to when you need it. Like, that's just not how this game works. People say, oh, you got to do this, you got to do that, you got to do this, you got to do it. Sometimes you can't. I don't think people are understanding that. Sometimes you get put into situations where there's not a whole lot you can do. It's a near impossible situation and you're fucked. Those situations exist in this game. And because this game has a ton of RNG, it's random. It's random. You get how many times you get put into those near impossible situations is random. Some people might find themselves in those situations more than others, not because they're making bad plays, just because it's RNG. Like, when I watch Apex Predator players play this game, and the pros, I watch them play, and when they also get put into those near impossible situations to get out of, a lot of the time they also die. They're not making any big brain plays that me and my team aren't. No, those situations where there's almost nothing you can do, yeah, a lot of the time they die too. And Cerulean, in your comment, you mentioned third parties are kind of just a byproduct of BRs, but there's definitely ways to mitigate being third-partied via taking smart fights, fast looting, and rotating and character comps. And then you said, I think Apex is at this point a game more about risk management, which is why a lot of people can be good at it. Once you learn the ins and outs of the game, it's become more of a, can we take this fight? Is this fight worth the time, ammo, and meds? What are the chances we get third-partied? And a lot of players can be very good at risk management and find heavy success. Pair that with cracked gun skill and movement, and you can win top 3 60% of the time or higher. So that is some common advice people have been giving me. Advice based around good decision making, like which fights to take, which fights to avoid, good rotations and things like that. Listen, there's no problem with my decision making in this game right now, right? I'm not making these terrible decisions, and it's not even the decisions I'm making. I'm not talking about me making bad decisions. I'm talking about other players making the fucking decision for me, okay? Other players make the decision. It's not all about, can we take this fight? Look at that team over there. Hey guys, do you want to fight them? I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about when 1, 2, 3, 5 teams fucking fly at us and you have to fight it. I'm not talking about that. Oh, just Valk ult away. Sometimes you can't. Sometimes it's not available. Sometimes they fucking Valk ult and follow you. I'm not talking about making smart decisions. Like, we make the smart decisions. I'm talking about other teams making dog shit decisions, and they force a fight on you, and they force the third party or the fourth party or the fifth party. Like, that shit happens. Maybe you guys are talking from your own experience, from what you've seen and what you've played. But what I'm talking about also happens, where teams will fucking fly at you and you have to fight it. You can't always avoid it, can't always get away. They just fly at you and you have to fight. You have to take the fight. And something I've noticed is every time we get third-partied, the third party shoots us and not the other fucking team. Like, I've just noticed that happens every time, not because we're in like a worse position than the other team. No, the third party just decides to shoot us. I don't know, RNG maybe? And when multiple teams do run at us and fight us, sometimes we do win. Sometimes we do kill squad after squad after squad. Sometimes we wipe 2 squads back to back, and then the third squad rolls up while we're still weak and wipes us. And when I see this stuff happen to Apex Predators as well, like, they also lose some of these fights when teams just fly at them. But I haven't seen that as often in the Pred games that I have watched. And I do think this game kind of gets easier in a way when you get in the higher ranks. I mean, because I don't think people make as dog shit plays as they do in the current rank that I'm at right now, which is Gold 1. I think people play smarter in, Pred lobbies. So you don't have people just flying at you and forcing a third party. Because some of these teams that fight us, that run at us and start a fight, like, they get third partied as well. They lose too. But like, they flew at us and we have to fight it. Sometimes you can run away, sometimes you can avoid it, sometimes you can see them coming. Not all the time. You can't always. So yeah, let's stop talking about your own decision making in this game. Let's talk about other teams, sometimes multiple teams, making the decision for you. And that decision that they make might be a bad decision for both you and the other team. Like they made a bad play, and that got your team wiped and their team wiped. But sometimes there's nothing you could do. They force the fight, and sometimes you have to take the fight. And another aspect of this game that can make a decision for you, and I talked about this in my recent video, was the zone. I understand that the zone is predictable. Like Siri, you mentioned how the zone isn't totally random. It works on predetermined permutations and patterns, which is why at the highest rank, people are pretty much already set up for endgame when they have their KP. Plus, there's beacons to further deduce which circle you'll be playing. I mentioned that in the video. I mentioned that in the video that you commented on. I mentioned how the zone is predictable. I literally said that. It makes me think some of these people just didn't watch the video. I mentioned how the zone is predictable, but it's also not 100% predictable. So you can have a very good idea of how the circle is going to end, where the next zone is going to be, but you don't always know exactly. So sometimes you will be put in a situation where your building, if you're in a building, is not in the next zone, but that other team over there, their building is in the zone, and they might have that shit, barricaded with caustic traps or Watson fences or rampart shit, and you might have to run across an open fucking field to get to them, and they have this advantage because they're held up in a house, and you're just out in the open having to run to the next zone. Yeah, you can Ash there, you can teleport, you can use the abilities, you can Valk ult, sometimes you don't always have your ult, even then, you're still the team that has to move, and they can shoot you while you're Valk ulting, I'm just saying that because of the way the zone moved, that other team is allowed to sit in their house, and you have to do something. You have to move. The zone made the decision for you, and because of that, it might have put you in an unfavorable position. Not saying there's nothing you can do. I keep saying that, but I don't think people are hearing it, so I'll say it again. I'm not saying just because you're in an unfavorable position means that you are going to lose that fight. No, there's sometimes you will come out on top, but you are being put into an unfavorable position a lot of the time in Apex based off of RN fucking G. The next comment I want to look at is from Helljumper. You said, I don't mind the RNG aspect of Battle Royale because of how it forces you to adapt. You don't drop an area with great loot, while you're going to have to put your skills to the test and either outwit your opponent in a gunfight or make yourself scarce and look for something better while avoiding enemy contact. Although I, of course, prefer the Halo system of weapons having definitive spawns on the map, the reason Battle Royale forces you to adapt is because you can't rely on knowledge all the time to point you in the direction of the good stuff. There's a lot more uncertainty, which adds some subtle realism that I think many people love Battle Royale for in the first place. Well, I agree with you on the uncertainty. There is definitely a ton of uncertainty in Battle Royales. And I do think that is what some people like about this game, right? Because there is so much RNG, sometimes the RNG will go in favor of those people and they will come out on top. Whereas if everything were even and balanced and they knew where everything was and everything was completely fair, they might not come out on top. They might get shit on. Like in Halo, where everything is super balanced, fair, even starts, you know where all the items are spawning, and you can even know when they're spawning if you track them. A good team can absolutely lock a fucking map down. You can lock that shit down and the other team just gets steamrolled. And I think it's those players that get steamrolled and can't fight back are the ones that do tend to like these more RNG games where the RNG goes in their favor and, they come out on top and they think that they were just, the better team. They did that they outwitted or outplayed their opponents, when in reality it just had a lot to do with the RNG. But Helljumper, you also mentioned adapting to, the hand that you were dealt, the circumstances that you find yourself in. And yeah, you do have to adapt to that stuff in Battle Royale games, in Apex Legends. But still, you can only adapt so much. Like, sometimes there's nothing you can do. Right? Like I've already explained, sometimes multiple teams can just fucking collapse on you and there's just no way out of it. Or a single team pushes you and forces a fight, and then you get third or fourth partied. Like, or sometimes RNG just wasn't in your favor or whatever. Sometimes you can't just adapt. Like, you can, and you should try to, but sometimes that doesn't always grant success. And not because you're doing something wrong, but because the RNG just isn't in your favor, or other teams make poor decisions and force a bad fight for both you and them, and you get wiped. And like, you can't. It's not just a matter of adapting, right? Sometimes you can't. I watch the best players play this game. They get in those situations as well, where there's not a whole lot you can do, and a lot of the time they fucking die as well. But because it's RNG, those situations will occur for some more than others, because it's fucking random. And again, I think people are defending this game based off of their own personal experience or from what they've seen of the game. But what I'm describing is definitely very real. It can happen, and it does happen, and that's just a fact. I don't know what it is about this game where people really try to convince themselves that it's all about skill. Yeah, there's skill involved, sure. Gun skill, movement skill, making good rotations, taking smart fights, and all that stuff, sure. But you cannot deny how much RNG is involved, and sometimes you will find yourself in a situation where you can't really do anything and you die. And again, not a situation that you brought upon yourself because of your bad decision making. No, a situation that other teams forced, or the zone forced on you. Now, this next comment I want to take a look at is from Connor L, and he says, when you said there should be ways for RNG to have less impact on the game, Apex Legends does have that. And first let me just say, I guess it does to an extent, but I argue Warzone, Season 1 Warzone, maybe even current Warzone, I'm not sure how it is now, but Season 1's Warzone did a much better job of mitigating the RNG than Apex Legends does. Like, Apex Legends is one of the fucking worst. Then Connor goes on to say, edge loot outside of point of interest is less likely to have good loot. POIs and areas close to the center of the map have higher chances to have good weapons, gear, and attachments. It's called the high risk, high reward mechanic, and that has been brought up many times. Even Respawn, Apex devs have mentioned this. It's not bad RNG. It's a proven statistic. You're supposed to get worse loot far from center map outside of a POI. Okay, so you get better loot, higher tier loot at the point of interest in Apex, right? Okay. But is that really even a good thing? Like, does that actually reduce RNG? Or does that force players into situations where RNG has a bigger impact on the outcome of the game for them? Like, because these POIs have better loot, many people want to land at the POIs to get that better loot. So you might be flying in to your POI and you have a team or multiple teams land with you because they also want that good loot. And now you're in a spot where you're landing with other teams, and you might find yourself in that situation where the other team gets the weapon or gets the higher tier armor, and the bins that you looted or the rooms you went in didn't have a gun, didn't have armor, and now you're at a disadvantage. If the loot was completely randomized, it would still be RNG ground loot, sure, 100%. But I think it'd be more common that players land away from each other because the good loot can be anywhere. With the good loot at the POIs, it's more common for teams to land together. And again, like I just explained, when you're landing with other teams, you can find yourself in those situations where you just don't get a gun, and the other team did get the gun and they got the armor. Like, that has happened to me multiple times. I'm running around looking for a fucking gun. I've opened 2 supply crates, ran into a room, can't find a fucking gun. And I'm checking areas that, usually do have a gun most of the time I land there. But because it's RNG and it's random, sometimes they don't. So yeah, I don't even know if the POIs having the better loot is even better than the loot just being completely randomized across the entire map. Continuing with Connor's comment, he says, I'm not even 2 minutes into the video yet. Let's hope you explain everything with the information available and statistics proven with the other points in your reviews. My statistics? My statistics is my experience. I've played the fucking game. I know what happens. I know how the game works. Those are my fucking statistics. Like, what do you mean statistics? I've played the game, so I know what can happen and what does happen and how much impact RNG can have on the outcome of the match. Then Connor goes on to say, that is also why fighting and third parties are so prevalent in Apex and Battle Royales. The best way to find good loot is to kill people with it. If attachments dictate whether you win or lose a fight, you shouldn't be playing Apex. I mean, okay. I mean, you can say that. That's cool and all. But I mean, sometimes they do. Sometimes you might have the same gun as another player and you guys get into a fight, but they had the extended mag. They had extra bullets. So they didn't have to, you had to reload before them or switch your weapon before them. They had more ammo in a single mag, so they were able to finish you. So, yeah, sometimes attachments do matter. Or something like the turbocharger on the Havoc. If you don't have that, then there's this big delay for your gun to begin firing. If you have a turbocharger on it, it starts firing like right away. Like you don't have that huge delay, so that gives you an advantage. So yeah, attachments do matter. Let's not act like they don't. And then finally, Connor says, your arguments about RNG and how third parties are annoying and how zones should work all contradict themselves. First off, they don't at all. I was trying to figure out the point you were getting at there. They literally don't contradict themselves at all. So you're just misinterpreting what I said, I guess. But there's literally no contradiction there. And then he goes on to say, if you don't want third parties, make zones slower so there's more playable area for teams to go instead of them going to you. Gameplay reviews aren't hindsight. They are how better players would do things to win fights and minimize how RNG affects them. RNG at high levels plays almost no role because good players aren't affected by it because they can adapt to situations and know how to play every situation out and win with disadvantages. The only RNG in high level play is if you get one magged or not in a fight. It isn't RNG, it's how you play with what you're dealt. Well, again, like I've already said, sometimes adapting is not enough to get you out of these disadvantaged situations. Situations you found yourself in because of RNG or because of other teams forcing fights and making bad decisions themselves. And I've watched high-level Apex. And again, sometimes those players are in these same situations and they don't make it out of it. Like, they lose to it as well. Again, they're not making these big brain plays that me and my team aren't. No, like when the RNG fucks them or other teams just fly at them and force these fights, a lot of the time they die too. A lot of the time it's a fucking dice roll. Especially those like endgame circles, like the really small endgame circles, where there's like multiple, like 5 fucking teams in like this small ass circle. That shit is a complete fucking dice roll. Like that is just everybody shooting, spamming abilities, grenades, whatever. Like that is roll the dice at that fucking point. Yes, you can minimize RNG in this game, but it does play a pretty big role. Well, it can be. It depends on the match. Sometimes the RNG did play a huge impact on the outcome of the game. Other times, not so much. It depends. And that is because it's random. So sometimes it has a bigger impact than others. Randomness. So anyways, I think I got my point across. In Apex Legends, there is an abundant amount of RNG. And sometimes that RNG will have a major impact on the outcome of the game. Sometimes you will find yourself in unfavorable positions because of RNG. Sometimes other teams will make decisions for you. They will force fights and put you into a bad situation, as well as put themselves in a bad situation. And that will, sometimes result in you losing the game or getting eliminated early. Other times the zone moves, which is the zone's predictable, very predictable, but not completely predictable. So sometimes the zone moving puts you in an unfavorable position. And everything else I mentioned throughout this video. This game is an RNG fuckfest. One of the most RNG based games I've ever fucking played, if not the most. There are ways to mitigate RNG in Battle Royales. Some people just say, oh, that's just Battle Royale. That's just Battle Royale. That's just Battle Royale for you. No, there is definitely ways to minimize RNG, and Warzone did a lot of these things, as I already mentioned, but Apex did not. Apex is still a RNG fuckfest. Again, not saying it's all about RNG, not saying there's no skill involved, but you can't deny there is a lot of RNG involved in this fucking game. If you don't see that, you're lying to yourself. And listen, I don't want to see people complaining about the current state of gaming, modern gaming, and then praising a game like Apex. Like, this game is complete ass. I get it, people enjoy it for different reasons. Some people probably just don't even care about ranked or winning, and they just like running around using abilities and shooting shit. Cool. But I can, and I have made a solid argument for why this game is complete ass. And with that, we're going to end it there. Hope you guys enjoyed the video, and I will see you on the next one. Peace out, everybody.